Thank you.
All right, we're live. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Illinois Green Party series. I'm your host, David Rich. We have a special guest on tonight, old acquaintance of mine, Joe Kopsick. Joe, how are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good. All right, so we're here because Joe is involved himself, at least more thoroughly, recently with the Green Party, and so we want to hear about his trek towards that and what's up with him. I think you're trying to get on the ballot, right?
Yeah, my campaign is in its early stages. I'm running for Illinois state representatives from the 60th district against the incumbent Rita Mayfield.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go. That's great. The 60th district. That is what area is that? Like, give me a couple towns.
That's Waukegan, where I live, and parts of Gurnee and North
Yeah,
Chicago, and a couple
North
others.
Chicago, Winthrop Harbor, stuff like that, right?
No,
Yeah,
it's
I
far
know
north.
Joyce.
Yeah.
Not that far north.
Yeah.
I know Joyce Mason, who is the state representative for District 60. So, had her on here once before. She's quite the environmentalist, trying to get some things going through, but not too much success, really. So that's very cool. Good for you. So why don't you tell us about your involvement with the Green Party?
Well,
What got you here?
it's kind of superficial at this point. Actually, the first party I was ever interested in when I first got interested in politics when I was 13 was back in 2000. I voted for Ralph Nader in my school election. And since then, in 2007, 2008, I got interested in Mike Gravel, Dennis Kucinich, and Ron Paul all at the same time. So they were talking about the Progressive Libertarian Alliance back then. So I've just been kind of shifting back and forth between the Libertarians and the Greens since then, I think a little bit like yourself. And I've dreamed about building that alliance as a way to defeat the two-party system. And like I said, campaign's still in its early stages. I started to flesh out a platform. I'm going to, add more detail to it, make it complete, and really also something I want to do is we need to establish a more strict separation of powers between federal, state, and local government. And part of that is figuring out what roles, what the duties of the state Senate are versus the state House. So that's something I have to figure out. I have to read the state constitution and figure out what committees I'd be allowed to join as a state representative. Basically, I'd like to get involved in the Green Party just because I've yet to tender my resignation with the Lake County Libertarians, whose membership and attendance has been steadily decreasing. I expect that to go back up in January as the primary start, but I'm about to leave my position as secretary there. So I want to leave them with the tools that they need to, be successful in recruiting new members. But at the same time, I don't want to be illegally supporting two parties at the same time. I mean, I wish them luck. Ideally, I'd like to have some kind of, fusion of parties. I don't know if probably have to be a lot of changes in the party bylaws of each parties to have that kind of fusion. Something we can do. I'm sorry to launch into my platform already, but
That's right.
there's about 7 to 10 states that allow people to allow people to collect signatures for multiple parties at the same time. And I'd like that to be legal in all 50 states. And Illinois is one of the states where that's not legal yet. So if people could go to the polls and see, oh, there's a candidate endorsed by both the Libertarian Party and the Green Party, if people could see that on their ballot in every state, that would be a dream. And then we wouldn't need to worry about, oh, who's going to win, Libertarians or Greens. We can just have both at the same time.
You have that similar sort of not exactly how you're describing it, but like with ranked choice voting, you could have greater opportunities for both of the third parties, Libertarian and Green Party. But that's about as easy to get done as anything else that third parties try to do, because the system is literally rigged against us. Like I actually had Spike Cohen on the show before. I don't know if you knew that.
That's great.
Yeah, no, it is great. I love Spike. And we spent a lot of time discussing third party obstacles. That's why I had him on. And the point of agreement on both sides, politically and economically, as well as the hurdles that we have to overcome to get on the ballot. For example, these aren't going to be exact numbers, but it will definitely illustrate the point. In Tennessee, it's something like for a candidate, the duopoly, meaning Democrat or Republican, it's something, let's say 1,000 votes to get on a district, like what you're doing. For a third party, it would be like 20,000 or something obnoxious like that. Again, those aren't exact numbers, but it's the gap between the two is absolutely just rude, and clearly rigged, so that we can't get on the ballot. It's about as anti-democratic process as one can get. But so yeah. So I don't know. I know that like during the well, you and I were both in the Libertarian Party at the same time. I moved over to here. I know you're kind of like you said, you're kind of straddling both for a little bit, and you obviously got to pick the one you're going to run as candidate for. And if I keep in touch, I did a third party show with Bill Redpath for like 5-6 months. Just ended a couple months ago, right before Halloween, I think. That was very cool, and I keep in touch. I talk to Brian Lambrecht on occasion, here and there. I text Spike, but he doesn't text me back. Because I'm sure he's an extremely busy person. But no, I have nothing but admiration. I have nothing but what's that?
Said being on Fox News and everything, he must be pretty busy.
Exactly. He's become very high profile. So he talks and lectures and speeches and like calling out the local village boards, which I love. No, he's a little pit bull, man. He's great. He said he knows his stuff. He's nobody to be trifled with. I'd love to see him in a debate. So yeah, let me ask you that. Like, I mean, do you think if we can get you like a local debate, like other candidates, anything like that, like Rita or something like that? Do you think you'd be able to do something like that?
Yeah, I'd love to do something like that. Honestly, and not to start slinging mud against my opponent, no dig against her. I'd be shocked and surprised, pleasantly surprised, if she would agree to such a debate. I think for at least definitely the last election, maybe even the last few in a row, she got 100% of the vote because she had no opposition. And she deserves to be in a debate. There's debates online of her debating Keith Turner, who's now an alderman in Waukegan, and I just met him recently. So I look forward to talking to Keith Turner about any ideas that he has about what we could do to improve on what Rita's done for the state, and also Deanna Burdett from the I don't know if she was Green Party. She was definitely DSA, but she's another person who ran against Rita that I could talk to. And yeah, I'd love to debate. I just hope she's ready for a thorough philosophical discussion filled with political theory and lots of Latin and Greek terms she might not be ready for.
That's I'm glad you said that, because a lot of my debate rhetoric, if you will, is of that ilk. Like, I'm trying to get to like the core principles of what's happening, because I really think that these principles like underpin when you try to set up a civilized society, you start with like what it should be, and so now you're already starting in like the arena of principles and values and stuff like that, and philosophy, like you were bringing up, and instead of just like like target issues or hot button issues like the trans issue or something, like going after like communities of people, instead of talking about like how like you should govern in a democratic society, like what does that look like? So that's really cool that you said that. But of course, being the Green Party, I sat at a friend's house yesterday for Christmas dinner, and they're a little older than I am, and they asked me, what do I do? I go, what's the other Green Party series? And he's like, what's the Green Party? I'm like, it's a third party political party. Like, what do you guys stand for? I'm like, well, green. We obviously care very much about the environment. It's like, you one of those electric car people? I'm like, I don't have one, but I mean, if that's the most effective strategy, then yes, I would be. I still need to do some research on that personally. I'm like, but so anyway, like, so people don't really know what the Green Party is, that it is, and what it's about. So like, I mean, as identifying as a Green Party candidate, besides some of these other strategies or other platforms you brought up, what about the environment? Like, what would you say about that?
Well, I would say the environment is one of the chief reasons why I've left the Libertarian Party a couple times, gone back in before, but the main reason, I think the environment is one of the most difficult topics that the Libertarians have, selling to voters. Because voters tend to think, oh, you want unregulated capitalism, you want corporations to pollute as much as they want. It's like, hang on, are we talking about corporations that get all their money from the state and from taxpayers, theft from taxpayers? Where is this private property you're talking about? Where are these private businesses that have no supports and no subsidies and no favors from the state? I can't find any. So what I really want is to promote everyone's debating socialism and capitalism, especially a few years ago. People
Yeah.
were starting to talk about communism, and it was getting really
Yeah.
contentious. And people are getting angry, protest in the streets.
Yeah.
And I think if we just told college students and younger kids that there's more economic systems besides just socialism and capitalism, that there's economic systems in between, like Georgism and mutualism, then people would see it's not a dichotomy. That we have more choices than just two, and everyone would stop fighting and stop, jumping into just one boat or the other. So I want to promote Georgism and geolibertarianism and land taxes as a solution to both environmental and economic problems at the same time. We need Georgism to align the economy with the environment.
I know what most of what you said means, but I don't know what Georgism is.
Sure, it's the philosophy
What's
of Henry
Georgism?
George. Henry George was a 19th century economist. He advocated for something called the single tax. It would involve tax simplification. You'd get rid of income taxes, sales taxes, and taxes on investment. And I would say get rid of taxes on investment and everything but land. What you would do is you would have the local governments fully tax the value of unimproved land. So the taxes would fall most heavily on people who are hoarding land, people who are polluting land, people who are allowing lands to fall into disrepair, people who start construction projects and don't finish them and leave the land unused so that other people can't use it while they still legally own it with the state's approval. And vacant lots would be something that would be taxed. Whoever owns those vacant lots, ideally, the local government would own all the vacant lots, so the public can decide what to do with it. And then
Right.
whoever is willing to pay for that land and develop on it, that would be distributed equally. Some people who are Georgists support a basic income. Some people don't. That could be debated on a local or state level. But I favor fixing the budget by I'm about to launch into a whole new thing here, a separation of taxes. We need separation of powers between federal, state, and local government. And with that, I think we should dedicate a form of taxation to each successive level of government. And then government would be easy to understand. It would be easier to teach to law students, political science students, civics students in high schools. Have the local governments tax property, not property as we know it, not based on property value, but basically tax destruction of property, taxing non-use instead of use. Because if you tax use, you're going to get less use. If you tax income, people are going to work less to avoid taxes. We need to reform taxes and just admit that people don't like paying taxes. And so taxes should be levied almost as a punishment for a crime. Most of the government budget should come from assessing fines and fees for people who either commit crimes against the public or people who use taxpayer resources, people who grow their businesses and earn profit based on the government taking from the taxpayers and giving to businesses. And we should tax non-use and non-improvement instead of taxing improvements away, which discourages people from producing and improving their property.
All right. Well, there you go. Very cool. And the other things were something libertarianism, geolibertarianism. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Yeah.
So geo meaning global and libertarian meaning individual rights. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, it would be basically just be the economic system I described, plus high protection of individual rights, plus something that a lot of libertarians, especially Adam Kokesh, have been promoting and agree on, which is decentralization. Intentional communities, libertarian communalism and Bookchianism. A lot of libertarians talk about, like, what if we just had city states? And there's even communists who say, like Lenin, for example, like, it's not about the state, it's about the community. If we could have communities be more independent and maybe fully funded and providing what the public needs, then maybe we wouldn't need as much state government involvement or federal government involvement. So you have a network or kind of a syndicate of local communities that are more or less independent. And then you would have a diversity of communities. People would have actual freedom because we'd still have free movement of people and capital, and people could choose their city. There'd be communist cities and socialist cities, capitalist cities, ANCAP cities, and you'd be able to move around and practice your ideals politically and economically.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, you're definitely singing my tune there. I got into like media, the radio station, and everything else that you were on, um, because of my love of local. I do horticulture, organic gardening, and permaculture stuff like that. And I mean, I've gone to the village board in Mundelein, and I know a couple of the people, and I'm like try to convince them to, start like a local organic farming, or at least encourage it somehow, because it's just a better way to be. Local is always better. It is truly your peers, or more truly your peers, than like just this random jury, going in like the judicial system. Going back to like having local cops. I remember growing up, I knew I knew their names, and there wasn't nearly as much, as far as I remember, at least not around us, problems with cops in that context as there is now. And anybody who thinks that things have gotten better since George Floyd, you're sadly mistaken. So yeah, what about? I mean, so like, I mean, the whole like the local policing and stuff like that. I've talked to libertarians about this a lot too. Going from like a local based policing force, and they use the term privatize. Okay, I mean, if the town's hiring you, I don't know if that counts as privatized or not, but whatever. Maybe it does. But the local community would have complete control over the police force instead of vice versa. And it wouldn't be this top down authoritarian nonsense where you get the crap beat out of you because you didn't use your turn signal or something. Well, do you have anything about police?
I don't have a lot of thoughts on police. For example, I wouldn't be against a law mandating that police officers need to live in the towns where they're policing, because then that would help connect them to their community. That would help them. They would be in the position to either decide whether to arrest or not arrest their own children. So I brought when I was on your show, the radio show, I brought a sign in with me that showed, as like a color coded sign that showed, and this is getting into some kind of gruesome stuff, but and this is a really controversial issue, but the police are legally allowed to murder and rape people. I don't know if anyone knows that. Let me start with the murder. In 1899, there was a Native American police officer in South Dakota, and he went up to a Native American civilian and he said, "I'm going to arrest you." And the civilian said, "I have court tomorrow morning. You're not going to arrest me. I'll see you at court in the morning." And the officer draws his gun because he's going to kill the guy. And the civilian draws his gun and he shoots the officer dead. Cut to a
Yeah.
year or two later. Cut to a year or two later. This is a case of
Black Elk versus USA. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Bad Elk.
Right.
Yeah, close. Yeah.
Bad
Yeah.
Elk.
Essentially, the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that that civilian was in the right to defend himself against an unlawful execution of that there wasn't a warrant. It was an unlawful arrest. And so he used deadly force to defend himself because the officer used deadly force. And cut to about, I think, 30 years later, New Jersey becomes one of the first states. I don't know if it was a Supreme Court decision or a law or something, but I think New Jersey passed a law sometime maybe around the 30s, and they became the first state to make it legal for police officers to kill civilians during an unlawful arrest. Excuse me. Oh, boy. So the police are legally allowed to kill people even during an unlawful arrest, and I think that's wrong. And the other thing is,
it's definitely wrong.
Yeah, and I'd like to see if we can do something about that legislatively. That Illinois must have a law that allows that, like New Jersey, so we should just repeal that law. And also, there's a number of states. I can't even turn off my phone. I had this problem when I started your show. I don't know how to turn off my phone. Just gonna throw that out 20 feet away. So there's a number of states that have failed to specifically make it illegal for police to have sex while on duty. And I was taught, I'm a private security guard. I was taught in my training that if you reasonably believe that you're under arrest, then for all intents and purposes, you're under arrest. So if a cop has you in his hold and he's having sex with you, it would be totally reasonable to assume that you're under arrest. So police should not be able to have sex while on duty because it's impossible to distinguish consensual sex versus rape when you're having sex with a police officer who's on duty. So I'd like to get rid of, I know I sound like Norm Macdonald here, but I like to get the murder and the rape out of political office. It's just that simple.
No, that is very simple. That's I don't think it's a false statement at all. Yeah, no, it's pretty creepy what cops can get away with. So okay. No, obviously, and I remember interviewing so many libertarian candidates when I had the radio show, and I would, like you said, like the environment is kind of a sticky issue for them because I don't see anybody like giving me an actual answer. I mean, every candidate I interviewed during that year, so this is election year, 4 years ago, I guess. Um, I was like, okay, so whether you believe in climate change or not, it's something you're going to have to contend with because too many other people do. And what about pollution? So the only comment I got, generally speaking, was like the market will take care of it. I'm like, well, that's not an answer. Okay, I mean, it might. I'm sure the market is going to have a lot to do with it. There's no doubt because of technology and stuff like that. But I mean, I think people are looking for a little more than that. So, like, what would you say about climate change as a Green Party candidate? Like, okay, climate change. What are you going to do?
Well, I don't want to say climate change is not real. What I will say is that humans are polluting a lot. The U.S. military is, I think, the biggest polluter on the planet.
Number
Um,
one, baby.
yeah, and but I'll also say that the emissions that are coming from volcanoes and other things totally dwarfs what humans do. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't do something about it.
Right.
But just because you want to do something about environmental problems doesn't mean that you have to get a centralized or the most distant government possible, the most corrupt and evil government possible to solve that. Because Vivek Ramaswamy mentioned a Supreme Court case, West Virginia versus EPA. I didn't get a chance to look into that, but he said it's the most important Supreme Court case recently. And I would assume that it probably, and I should have looked this up first, I would assume that it ruled that, I don't know if you notice this, but ecology and environment, even health, are not mentioned in the Constitution. So why are we letting?
No, I know. I know.
Yeah, I figured you knew that, but some people don't.
Yeah.
So why are we expecting the federal government to regulate on environment when it was never the federal government's responsibility in the first place? Like we saw Roe v. Wade collapse, and I thought we were going to see the EPA collapse first. The EPA has no authority, so the states and the government and the people should regulate the environment.
Right.
And I think there's something to the idea that the market should regulate the environment, but we don't have a free market. We have a market that's clogged with monopoly and legalized theft from the taxpayers. And some people say, "Oh, we need the government to invest in clean energy solutions," and that's a great idea. But why do you have to actively have new laws? Like, don't we have enough laws already? Why don't we just repeal all the subsidies for big oil? Then we can let the market sort itself out because we'll actually have a free market. And then if we can get our budgets and our taxes under reform, under control, then people will have more money to spend and they'll be able to boycott energy sources that they don't like and invest their money in energy sources that they do like. And that's going to solve things.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Well, that's very cool. That's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen at the federal level with like, I know that there was obviously a infrastructure bill that passed overwhelmingly and supposedly included a lot of like new green technology and infrastructure things and so on. So I don't know what's going to happen from that, but we will see because we just had the that big thing in Dubai. Was it COP? Is that what it's called? COPs? COP, whatever it's called. It's in all the big heads of the nations get together and talk about it. And I guess the general conclusion from that whole event was that well, we haven't really done anything, and the time is getting short. So we'll see what happens. But okay, that's very cool. And you live in where do you live, Waukegan?
Waukegan, yeah.
Yeah, okay. As far as your campaign goes, like how do you want to approach it? Like, gonna go door to door? You gonna do stuff like that? You gonna like just barrage the local news stations, or what are you gonna do?
Well, the last time I ran for U.S. House, I had a friend. So I'm good at coming up with platforms, and I also use Adobe Illustrator, so I can make my own campaign literature for free. And I have a friend who bought me some leaflets. She got me hundreds of thousands of leaflets. Obviously, I didn't use all of them. And I was trying to campaign while the COVID shutdown was happening. If you remember the 2020 election, it was just awful for you go to someone's door, they're just like, the plague, get away from me. So yeah, I'd like to drop leaflets at people's doors. I work overnight, so if I just time things right, I can go to people's houses in the evening. And Waukegan's a pretty heavily concentrated, populated area, so there's no shortage of places I can go. And also, I'm going to look into. I got to talk to Anna Schiefelbein about filing petitions online, collecting signatures online. I don't know much about that, and like I said, my involvement in the Lake County Green Party is kind of new and kind of superficial. It's been kind of off and on the last 6 years since I moved back here from Oregon. I'm from Illinois originally, but I was out in Oregon for 2 years. So I think there's no shortage of people who have expertise in things like signature collection, recruiting volunteers, ranked choice voting, and any policy position I can name. There's probably someone in the state legislature who's already proposed a bill like that. So I look forward to gathering some information about that, and just it's kind of good to be a politician because it's the only profession where plagiarism is not just acceptable, but like the norm. Like you don't always have to come up with your own ideas. Like I have plenty of my own ideas from studying political theory in college, but there's a lot of people, and you just find the right people. Like as a libertarian or a green, and I'm kind of both, I admit. Like I think it would be very easy to reach across the aisle and find Democrats who are supporting, things with the environment or education or social values that I support, and find, economically conservative ideas that I support being proposed by Republican legislators. So I look forward to finding out what has already been proposed and just be like, well, I would support legislation like that, copy paste into my platform.
Right. Because even competing politicians are talking about the same issues. So like, there's only so many possible solutions. I mean, you have to draw from somewhere. All right. Yeah. So Loud Thinker is watching. Says marketless economy should be tried. Marketless economy. Okay. Those who get a seat at EPA were to regulate in the name of the people, in my opinion. No, that's true. But they're not voted in. That's part of the problem. That's one of a big problem with libertarians, especially, is that they're appointed or hired, off the streets, if you will, and they're not voted in by us, and we mostly don't even know what's happening with them. And all of a sudden, the EPA comes out and says, "Oh, here's this new environmental regulation," and nobody seems to know where it came from. Anyway, Loud Thinker also says, "Government of the people, by the people, for the people on paper. Sounds great, but impossible without getting money out of politics." Okay, what say you on that?
Well, that's an issue where I have to go to Ron Paul's book, Liberty Defined. He explained that the reason there's so much money in politics is because we're not following the Constitution. What I like to say about the Constitution and the separation of powers is that if you want to look at, the easiest to remember way to do this is the 3 M's: money, mail, and military. Those are the government's primary responsibilities. Things like agriculture, education, health, retirement, social security, that came way later. And people expect the federal government to do so much, so its size and scope are out of control. And that's what invites the big money. So if we just had the states and people stand up while the federal government stands down and gets out of those issues I just named, while the people in the states take them up, then, well, there might be a little bit more big money in the states and local, but at least you'd know which states have it the worst. You'd be able to move around instead of this one size fits all where wherever you go, the federal government's controlling you.
Yeah, no, it's astonishing. Like, I think about daily, like, the areas of my life where this federal government is not at all involved. And I think it's like acquiring friends, and that's about it. And maybe even indirectly they are there just because of like certain like rules of like how people can like make money in certain areas, whatever. But yeah, no, it's pretty creepy. That's how they've grown. Like, I don't know. I mean, my understanding of the Constitution and the founding fathers is that it was supposed to be, more left to the local areas and that kind of thing. That's why they had local towns and counties and states and so on.
Yeah, that's something that I had to ask progressives when I was first getting into libertarian ideas about 10 years ago. And progressives would say, "You don't understand the supremacy clause? State government trumps local and federal government trumps the state." And I would find myself asking them things like, well, if the federal government's supposed to do everything, then what's the point of the state governments? Why would you even want state governments to exist if you want the federal government to do everything?
Yeah, and the supremacy clause is for like when there's a conflict between the two bodies.
Yeah.
Like with slavery and stuff like that, where the federal government's like, all right, no more. The states were like, no, we're going to do that. And the fellows go, no, you're not going to do that. They can.
Just let me jump in. The federal government, the supremacy clause says the federal government is only supposed to be supreme in those issues which are specifically enumerated in Article 1, Section 8, the enumerated powers. And that's money, mail, military lands, stuff like that, treasury.
Yeah, right. Um, so Loudspeaker commented, yes, but those who put them in those positions, I guess he's referring to the EPA people, choose people who could do the job, even though they are not elected. They are selected by the elected. I mean, they're indirectly, yes. We elect the people who select them. And yes, I mean, Loudspeaker, I'm not saying that they hire morons. I'm sure the EPA hires like, horticulturists and geologists and agricultural scientists and PhD. I'm confident they staff themselves well in that area. But I'm just saying that it is an issue for some people. In a democracy, you're supposed to vote for the people who write the policies, who create the policies that govern you. And when you have people that are doing that weren't elected by us, then some people have a problem with that. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that definitely people do. And it's definitely, I've been like, is that okay with me that these people are making rules, about me that I had no say in? I mean, like, there might be a sense of like efficiency to it. Like, I don't want to have a referendum for every single little thing the government does. Every day, all day, every day would be filled up with that. But yeah, I was just bringing up that some people are bothered by that. And then so you have like people on the right when a lot of times their platform is to take down these agencies, the FDA, the EPA. I mean, all the 3-letter agencies because of that very reason. And there's also reason to believe statistically, like the Department of Education, our education system has measurably gone down since their inception, when the exact opposite was supposed to happen. So then you ask just about like practicality and functionality. Well, it's not doing what it's supposed to do. Get rid of it. Okay,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So, but I mean, you're not wrong, Loudthinker. Yes, they are selected by the people we elect. So, okay. I mean, so is the dude from the Federal Reserve, and that's a
And
nightmare. Go ahead.
if we don't get rid of these unconstitutional departments, then someone we don't like, most people say Republicans will take it over and they'll use it for evil. That's what Adam Kokesh said. So get rid of it before he compared it to the ring. Get rid of it before someone uses it for evil.
The Ring and the Lord of the Rings?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that.
Yeah.
All right. So now he's saying if libertarian ideology is liberty, it will cause chaos. I don't want a neighbor saying I have enough guns and ammo. I don't want my way taxes to go to the police department, etc. Okay, so like being threatened by your neighbor with a gun, I don't think really counts as liberty. But I mean, being threatened by anybody would be somebody trying to take your liberty. So libertarian ideology. I mean, like my understanding of libertarian ideology is you as an individual have a right to create your own path in life, to make your own choices and decisions with the least amount, if not no coercion or force. That as remember the famous magazine that is a libertarian magazine is called Reason. That you are as an individual, you are a rational moral agent. You have the ability to think for yourself and make your choices, and that should be intruded upon or interfered with as little as possible, unless you use your reasonable faculties, in a negative way, in a way that it wouldn't amount to like true reason, and start harming other people and stuff like that. And then of course there's all sorts of discussion about lines to draw, like, well, what if I just go out in the public and I pour my gasoline on my head and light it on fire? Am I allowed to do that? I don't know. Like I wouldn't recommend it, but I don't know. And freedom of speech, something like that. Like, I mean, there's no doubt that the libertarian ideology, manifests as it looks practically, day-to-day life, needs some discussion about what that means. Does that mean I get to just like go up to any corner and just take a leak because I have to go to the bathroom because it's my body? That's public defecation. Is that okay? So
No.
the age old thing of like you get your free speech. So do I get to scream fire in a crowded theater and cause damage? No, not morally at least. That kind of thing. So and even now, like with like laws and stuff like that in this country, like you can go up and start like just telling somebody that, swearing at them, whatever else. Well, technically, that at least in most places, if not everywhere, it's protected under the First Amendment. Now, that's not very nice to do. To go up to somebody in public and just start, belittling them and being belligerent towards them if the kids are involved in front of them or something like that. That's a terrible thing to do, but it's not illegal.
Yeah, I mean, the whole libertarian ideology is my rights stop where your rights begin. You don't get to
Right.
infringe on my property or my privacy unless I did it to you, and then I'm duly charged and sentenced, and then you get to take away my freedom because I've demonstrated that I don't respect yours. And liberty would not be chaos. I don't think there's anyone who would agree that the main problem in society is that we don't have enough, or that we have too much freedom. I don't think anyone would say we have too much freedom, because if you think like, what's the opposite of freedom? That would be slavery. If we have too much freedom, then you're saying we don't have enough slavery, and I think no
Yeah.
one would make. Uh, so what I want to do is we need to get coercion out of every element, not just of politics, but of life. We need to take the consent of the governed as a founding principle, and we need to exalt that. We need to make that the centerpiece of political, economic, social, and moral thought. Consent is not just for the bedroom; it's for the boardroom, and it's for politics too. So, liberty is not going to bring chaos. We have to empower people to protect themselves, and if that requires using guns, then that's fine. There have been people who said that, I think it was Penn and Teller had someone on their show, and they said someone came into this diner and they started shooting everyone, and that was the one day where I said, maybe I don't need to bring my peace to the restaurant today, and I wish I had. And I think there was a massacre in Colorado a year or two ago at a Walmart or something, and someone had a gun with them and they shot back. So this the solution to a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And the average police response time is some like 7 to 20 minutes. The police are not always going to be there when you want their help. And like I said, the police are legally allowed to rape and murder people in Illinois. You want corrupt politicians deciding who gets a gun and who doesn't. You want police showing up and arresting the person who made the call half the time, maybe not half the time, but some of the time, um, because they might be technically committing a crime too. And you don't know. You want to be able to defend yourself. It's better to have a gun and not need it than to need a gun and not have it.
That's a very good point at the end there. Yeah, when I was living in Portland, Oregon, there was a shooting in a mall outside of Portland. I think it was Clackamas Mall, and there was a guy in there with a concealed weapon on him, and he's the guy he shot the guy who was shooting people. But you don't hear
Yeah.
that on the mainstream news. I heard it on NPR, but you don't hear it on CNN or anything like that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, I agree. Sorry, my point was libertarians support government so small. Who's to decide whose freedom ends where? That's what he just said.
We leave it up to the individual for the most part, unless and until the police arrive, which takes a while. You know, you can't do anything to protect your life if you're waiting for the police to arrive. Um, this is kind of a personal thing. So my dad, who's a totally loathsome, corrupt criminal, and he's a lawyer. I remember having a political awakening, asking him, "What do you think about guns?" And I said, "Well, what happens?" Let's see if I can remember this. I said, "What happens if if someone is going to shoot you and the police don't respond in time?" And my dad said, "What do you want me to say? Die?" And I'm just thinking, well, is that your answer? I guess that's your answer. You would die. You'd rather be dead and politically
That break the
likable.
law. Yeah, no, for sure. No, that's a pretty lame answer.
Yeah, they want so badly to avoid breaking the law that they're willing to die in order to prove a point. What's the point? You're dead.
well, I have a bumper sticker actually.
Go ahead.
That's something I said on my radio show a lot. And I was just reading his last thing. Um, it says morality always trumps the law, always. So to do the right thing, as a human being, as a person, um, is more important than whatever the law says. Remember, the law can be anything. It says you get the certain type of people, enough of them into the office, they're going to make laws that against the kind of people that they don't like. The Republicans are on this massive rampage against, the trans community, the LGBTQ plus community. They're banning every other book. That's their answer. Everything is authoritarianism. Just ban, ban, ban. Arrest them, arrest them, arrest them. It's just crazy to see it. Democrats aren't much better, but they're better in some of those ways and worse in other ways. But No, it's important. Just also remember too, besides just the truth of the proposition that morality always trumps the law, just from a legal point of view, 1981 Warren versus DC, 2005 Gonzalez versus Rock City, and I believe 2016 or 17 concerning um uh the what was it? Oh geez, some school shooting, Parkland school shooting, Parkridge school shooting out east. And the
Oh yeah,
second one, 2005 versus Gonzalez, was a Supreme Court decision. Anyway, all three the judge's decisions in all three of those cases was that police have no legal obligation to protect anybody. Their job is
yeah,
not to protect you. That's protect and serve on the side of the vehicles is 100% propaganda bullshit. Okay, they
yeah,
don't protect any. Not to mention just the functional problem of them showing up after they show up after the crime is committed. They don't show up
yeah.
beforehand. And if they do, it's probably a fluke. It's a random happenstance. So
Yeah.
the whole notion that they protect us is nonsense. Yeah, we need to go back to everybody caring. Good. We have someone will
I'd
say I
like to
don't want to.
comment. I'd like to comment on that if you don't mind, because this is getting into my
Please.
territory. I'm a private security guard. So yeah, Warren versus DC, 1981 Supreme Court. I think they ruled unanimously. It's what it is exactly is the police have no duty to protect and serve the general public unless the person asking for protection had a previously existing private contract with the police. So what I think that implies is the police are there to protect property. Why are the public police protecting private property? Yet I, as a private security guard, I'm told that I'm there to protect the people more than I'm trained to protect property. So we have an overlap of police duties and
Wow.
private security guard duties. So what I'm talking about, we have to have a separation of powers between federal, state, and local, a separation of taxes, a separation of state and the economy, and a separation of police and private security guard duties so that they're not fighting for jurisdiction. Um, and I also just want to speak to libertarianism. Like libertarianism has gotten a real bad rap, like large L libertarianism, Libertarian Party. It's gotten a bad rap among leftists, and deservedly so, because there are some people in the Libertarian Party who say we should have capitalism that should be everywhere. They say that capitalism and free markets are the same thing. In my book, they're not. Free markets would be a market situation. You can trade with anyone you want. Each person helps determine the price with their purchasing power, however little they might have. They can still choose to boycott. We don't have total freedom to boycott because we have the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947, which limits the right of secondary labor actions. So we don't have a fully free market because of that and because we have monopolies. And I don't agree with the libertarians who talk about throwing socialists and communists out of helicopters so they can laugh about it, because that's just what the CIA has been doing for 100 years. Socialism is not violence. Socialism and statism are not the same thing. The state is a violent political ideology. Socialism is a not necessarily violent, usually peaceful economic ideology. And communism is a stateless political implication that they of socialism that they hope will lead to decentralization and anarchy and more rights for each community. So I don't want to be like a capitalist kind of libertarian who aggressively promotes and makes everyone compete all the time. Part of freedom is we have free and open competition, and that's balanced against free and open cooperation. And cooperatism is a value that the Greens share. So I don't want to lean too heavily on libertarianism or make people think I'm a capitalist, because I'm not. I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm what you call a mutualist and a Georgist. And if we just tell people that those exist, then maybe they'll stop fighting so much.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one of the first conversations I had on the third party show was about like that, like you said in the beginning, is that like this notion of capitalism versus I said Marxism, but generally socialism is a false dichotomy. There's a ton of different ones. Even within those two, there are different schools of socialism there are. I mean, just like dozens, if
Yeah,
not hundred. Capitalism,
yeah,
like probably not as many in capitalism, but you have penny capitalism, regional capitalism, corporate capitalism, crony capitalism. I mean, the free market capitalism. By the way, the definition of capitalism changed to free market like sometime in the 70s. By the way, before that, it almost always meant, if not always, meant the private ownership of capital. That's where it gets its name from. Okay,
yeah,
so like, and there's not a complete. There is a difference between that and free market. There's such a school as free market socialism. Socialism generally tends to just mean it's constant throughout all those schools. So everybody thinks it merely means like the big government controlling all industry and market. No, in fact, most of them are anarchists. Most socialist schools are anarchists. It means
Yeah.
that the laborers own their labor like all the time. Okay,
Right.
that's the most simplified form. We can elaborate on that hugely, but it's about labor.
And what that
And
means is that there's tons of different types of socialism and communism that haven't been tried yet. So we can't conclude that it always fails or that it always results in statism any more than we conclude that capitalism always results in statism. And yeah, what you said is that your definition of capitalism, an economic system, a private ownership of capital, it's a perfectly good definition, but a slightly more onerous definition that I would say is capitalism is the domination of the economy by capitalist interests. And I'm not a socialist or a capitalist. I think we should get the federal government, especially in most government, if not all government, out of economic decision making so that capital owners and laborers can come to a direct decision and negotiate without being compelled to. And I think they would negotiate because there's no reason to avoid negotiation, because negotiation just ends with, the workplace being burned down or the workers being gunned down by, Pinkertons or whatever. So to avoid conflict, I think they would come to a free and open and peaceful and fair negotiation without outside force.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, I think technically I use that in air quotes because I think it comes from like the National Committee, is that the Green Party actually identifies as a libertarian socialist party, which
Yeah.
is like what we're describing is kind of the best of both put together.
Yeah.
That's why, I mean, when somebody asks me, I say a libertarian socialist. Most people are like, isn't that a contradiction? I'm like, no, it's not. Actually, but because they automatically think right away that socialism means the government controlling everything, and therefore there is no liberty. I mean, if that was the case, that the government did control everything, you're right, there would be no liberty, and therefore that would be a contradiction. But that is not what socialism means. So, okay. Read Noam Chomsky. It's hard to argue against Noam Chomsky. Read some of his books. He's a libertarian socialist, which also is another name is of anarcho-syndicalism. Yeah, I mean, it's all about, I don't know, why would you not want like individual rights? Like, why'd you not want to, choose to live how you want to live? That's what drives me nuts about like some of these, Republicans or right wingers, like going after these other communities. I'm like, it's none of your damn business, dude. Like, if you don't like homosexuality, don't be gay. If you don't like abortions, don't have them. If you know, otherwise, shut up and mind your own business. Anyway, that's my little rant. We only got a few minutes left here. What else? What else you got going?
I don't really know where to begin. We covered a lot. I look forward to putting my platform together. How about we talk about transportation for a sec? How come when my car gets damaged from potholes in the public roads, I can't go to the government and be like, hey, your public roads damaged my vehicle. Where's my money? And where do the toll roads go? My theory is if we give people a couple options on how to pay tolls, like iPass, change. I have change in my car. iPasses are expensive. I don't always use 94. And whenever you go on Google Maps, they always just route you through the most expensive interstate highways. What if I don't want to go that way? So if they just open the toll roads back up, I could throw some change in there and not worry about, it could be $2 and then if you skip the toll, you get a notice and now it's $15 and you have a late fee. It's another $20. So just give us more options to pay. We need more choices, not less choices in general.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's a great idea because that's I mean, there's only a few states that actually have like tollways. Well, there's New Jersey Pike. Is that right? It's like one toll on one side or something like that. And I think Florida has something. Illinois, I don't remember who else, but like, I mean, I've been all over this country. Like most states do not have tollways. It tends to like clog up. You get this bottleneck. Now we have the thing you just drive through and it goes read your little thing on your license plate. That's Big Brother weird. I mean, I guess I went through a couple but you don't even notice it until like you're almost at the deadline and you're about to pay a higher fee because I'm like, I didn't realize I owed you guys $20 for 2 months.
I had a friend from New Jersey who complained about this, and he said like the only major road leading into New York City from New Jersey had a heavy toll. So for all intents and purposes, most of the people who are driving around that part of northern New Jersey, it costs money to leave the state. And if the state can charge you money to leave the state, isn't that kind of like an open air prison?
Yeah,
And
that's
this is
that's
leading
pretty. I didn't think about it that way, but you're
yeah,
right.
this is leading into the driver's licensing discussion. People say, why would libertarians say get rid of driver's licensing? Well, first, I have a question for you. If a 14-year-old without a license is driving his dying father to the emergency room, should the police pull them over and arrest that kid while the guy has a heart attack in his car and dies? No.
Of
So
course not.
it's possible to learn how to drive before you're 16. Anyone in a rural area knows that. And aside from that, there have been at least 25 state and federal Supreme Court cases over the last 100 years. You could almost say they routinely ruled that the state has no right to impose a fee for the imposition of a license. And this is where you got to get into Ninth Amendment case law. The government does not and should not have a right to convert a natural freedom that we were born with, the right to travel, the right to use our legs, and the right to engage in reasonably efficient travel, use cars, which doesn't have to be governed by laws. It's kind of common sense. The rules of the road, kind of a common law thing. So it's easy to learn how to drive. The Netherlands did an experiment where they realized they have too many road signs. Everyone's getting in car crashes because they're distracted because there's signs everywhere. They took some signs down and traffic deaths decreased. So I'm sure we could do that here. But yeah, the state shouldn't have a right to convert a natural freedom into a paid privilege, which gives the government the exclusive right to profit. That turns the state into a corporation, which it's already legally defined as a corporation. Everyone who
No.
loves the government will say, oh, we need the government to regulate the corporations. It's like the government is a corporation and it's giving all our money.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's creepy how far away we've gone from what I really truly believe what our founding fathers meant in a lot of areas. I mean, let's not forget they also kicked it all off with slavery, so that wasn't great. But so there's been some progress. But yeah, no, the freedom of movement thing is a big deal, and it is a protected right in the Constitution. Um, and like what you say, privilege? Yeah. So like if you have to pay for it, it's not a right. It's if I need somebody else's permission to do it, it's no longer a right. It's a privilege.
Like
That
property
ties
tax.
into all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Including again going back to cops when they shackle you in chains and put you in a cage. If that
Yeah.
imagery harkens you back to another time in American history, and there's nothing you can do about it. Yeah, I don't think so. But
Yeah.
that's, so, go ahead.
Since when is being shanked in prison part of your official sentence? They kind of leave that out when they do the sentencing. They
Yeah,
take away
no,
your
for
right to
sure.
defend yourself.
Yeah, no, for sure. What's his face just got stabbed like 25 times or something? Derek Chauvin.
Uh, so,
But and I don't like the guy, but I don't wish that upon him. That's terrible.
right.
But yeah, no, okay, well, cool. Well, we're just about at the end here. Thanks for coming on, man, Joe. It's good to see you. Good to talk to you. Always love talking to you. We always have interesting conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you have. I think you have. Do I even? Well, I think we have each other's number, but we can get each other through Messenger
Yeah.
too.
Sure.
If you need anything, if you want to just chat and like kind of work out your platform positions, I'm a good listener and a decent, feedback guy.
Sure.
So let me know. Otherwise,
Let me just say my final message. I ran for federal office a few times, so I think throughout this campaign, people are going to realize I kind of need some continuing education on local and state issues because, like I said, I lived out of state for a little bit. I was in Wisconsin and Illinois, so I still have spent most of my life in Illinois, but I haven't really watched like Illinois legislative sessions. I'm not really up as much as most people might be or might want me to be. But I think that's okay because if I knew everything or wanted to know everything, then I would just be kind of like a cyborg, hive mind, power hungry, corrupt person. And as Ron
no.
Paul said, sorry to keep quoting libertarians in a green meeting, but Ron Paul said, nobody's qualified to run your life but you. And he said, I don't have all the answers. We're going to return freedom to the people and give people a choice whether they want to compete or cooperate or do both. And like you said, getting back into the political theory, there is such a thing as free market socialism. Imagine we had totally open and free markets with no monopolies, but also imagine that every or most properties or businesses, imagine every business was a cooperative and they traded on the market with each other.
Exactly.
So there is we can negotiate. There's a compromise that can be made. and having the Republicans and Democrats fight each other for control, and just a lot of people just in kind of just trading, going back and forth from one party to another, or going in and out of the industries they're supposed to be regulating, having private-public partnerships where the government sponsors corrupt corporations and forces us to buy from them. That's not the solution. The solution is more individual liberty and more community independence at the same time, and having things like planned communities, intentional communities. I don't know if I can remember this. Propertarian communities, for lack of a better word.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, if you're encouraged, listeners, viewers, go on Wikipedia and look up libertarian socialism and read that. I think that I read it before. It gives a very sufficient account of what it is. And you'll hear a lot of what
mutualism.
Mutualism is another word you could use.
Yeah.
If you want, but yeah, no, it's. I think you're gonna read it and you're like, well, yeah, that makes sense. So Loud Thinker, thank you very much for chiming in. That's always great. And yeah, again, Joe, like hang in there, buddy, and I'm sure we'll be talking to each other more often than not in the coming future. Because when's our primary, right? April, March, April.
I gotta do some research on that. Could be.
Yeah, looking at that. Yeah, stay in touch with Anna. She knows everything. So she's my go-to for sure. I hope she's not watching and thinking I'm just like burdening her with everything. But so yeah, everybody, thanks for tuning in for the Illinois Green Party series. I'm your host, David Rych, with our special guest, up and coming political star of the Green Party here in Illinois, Joseph Kopsick. Thanks for coming on the show, buddy. Till next time, be good, be green. All right, so we're gonna hit end the stream here. Don't say anything because there's a lag and you don't want to incriminate yourself.